Hey everybody, this is Jen. Welcome to the homestead and to my channel. Today I am going to be making some sourdough bread, and I figured I'd take you along for the journey. So follow me along right here on Garden Jen's Journey. Alright, so one of the things we have to do in order to make sourdough is feed our starter. This is starter that I made myself back in February of this year. So compared to some people who have starters for years, this is a fairly young starter, but it's a very active starter. I can feed this just a little bit of flour and water and it goes crazy. It's a very, very healthy starter. So I'm just going to add some flour and some warm water because I want to get this active, get it going. And it's kind of cool today and I'm on a time crunch. So I'm going to add some warm water just to help it get active, even though it's kind of cool today. If you weren't on a time crunch, you could certainly use room temperature water, cool water. It's just fine. Yeah. So, and I'm just going to add a couple of ounces of flour and water to this. I do measure it. I didn't used to. But I do find that measuring it by weight does produce better results than just going by your volume measurements, your dry cups and stuff like that. It gives better results that way. So yeah, so I'm not specific as far as most of the time you have a certain ratio where you do starter with your flour and your water. But because this is so active and I've been working with it a while, I just add flour and water to what I already have in here and get it going. And it seems to work just fine. That way I have no discard. And if I have a ton of extra sourdough starter, eventually I will actually dehydrate some. So I have it in case for some reason the sourdough fails, or I can pass it along to somebody else. Alright, so let's get going. Okay, so I have this set for ounces to get my starter going for my batch today. So I'm going to add 2 ounces of flour and 2 ounces of water to this. Okay, there's that. And if it's not exact, like this is 198, it's fine. There we go. And the water's just slightly over, but that's alright. I'm going to shut that back off. We don't want to drain our battery. And we're going to mix this up. And I know that there's a lot of sourdough people that say don't use metal on your ferments. It kills them or whatever. You know, that's fine, but I have not had problems at all of using metal. So I just go ahead and do it. Sometimes I do use my wooden spatulas, but not today. Alright. So, I'm going to add just a touch more flour because I do have just a little bit too much water in there. Alright, there we go. Alright. So I don't think you can see in here the consistency, but you want it between a biscuit dough and pancake dough consistency, basically. As I go for about 100% hydration ratio, maybe 80, depending on the humidity in the air. And then I'm just going to put my lid back on it loosely. And I have a piece of tape here. It just shows me where the level of my starter is, and it is right about here right now with everything mixed in. That way I can make sure that it does indeed start activating. And we're going to let this sit for a couple hours, and when it starts going up basically almost double is when we can start getting it ready to use for our bread making today. Alright, so we are ready to go as far as continuing with making our sourdough. So our starter is nice and happy. You can see it has basically almost doubled in size. So this is ready to go and start working. So we have our starter. We also have, this is bread flour. It's specifically called bread flour. It's got a higher protein, higher gluten content. This is very important to making sure your sourdough turns out. I have tried this using whole wheat flour, using all-purpose flour, and you just don't get the results. You end up in quite a disappointment. So having actual bread flour for this project is very important. But I know that there's a lot of health benefits to having whole wheat flour, so I do use some whole wheat flour in this recipe to kind of get the nutrients that are in the whole wheat flour. Then we also have some salt, just some regular simple salt, and then some water. So very simple. I make double batches here on the homestead. We go through a lot of bread and it freezes very well. So I just go ahead and make a double batch, and I will put the recipe that I use in the description box below. And you can go ahead and cut it in half if you only want to do one at a time, or you can stay with the double batch recipe. Again, we do weigh everything. It just turns out better. I have done it before just by measuring with the volume cups and things, but I get better results when I measure it. So we are going to be measuring in grams. That's usually how things that are baked are measured. They are measured in grams. So I had measured in ounces to feed the starter, so I have to switch my scale here to read in grams. There we go, we are in grams. Alright. So we're going to measure our starter first, because we need to get the starter and the water going together. So I'm going to use 200 grams of starter. Alright, so there's 200 grams. And I'm left with barely any starter in here left. But that is perfectly fine. My starter is so active that I can just add, go ahead and add the 2 ounces of water and 2 ounces of flour like I did in the beginning, and let this sit overnight, and I'll be happy. But I'm not going to do that till I get ready to go to bed for the evening. Then I will feed it. For now, we're just going to set it up and let it be. Alright, so we got our starter. We're going to go ahead and put that in. Okay. And this is a very moist starter, so I probably won't use as much water as I typically use. And that's one of the things you need to keep an eye on when making the bread, is, especially if your humidity is high, is check the moisture of your starter. If it's really loose, kind of like this, you're going to want to decrease the amount of water you use so you still have a nice tight dough. All right, so there's that. Okay. The reason why I use the second bowl is sometimes I cannot get this big bowl on the scale adequately. So, yes, I dirtied another dish, but sometimes I have to do that. All right, so to this, we're going to add 16 grams of salt. And it might seem like a lot, but remember, this is a double batch. So we're going to do 16 grams of salt. There we go. And you want to use salt that doesn't have iodine in it. So this is just regular sea salt. Fine ground sea salt. It'll dissolve in the water very quickly. Alright. And then to this, we're going to add, now my recipe states 500 grams of water. But again, because my starter is quite moist, we're going to knock it down a little bit. I'm going to start with 450 grams and see how that does as far as moisture content. Alright, that's close enough. You can always add more water. It's hard to take it back out of bread dough once you get going. So we're going to mix this up. We want to break up the starter into the water. Get it to dissolve. And it doesn't have to dissolve completely. This just helps it get really mixed in here so it incorporates into the dough very well. Alright. There we go. Okay. Now we're going to add our flour to this. Alright. So I generally add 800 grams of flour total. So I am going to add 600 grams of the bread flour, and then we're going to do the other 200 in the whole wheat flour. All right. Then we're doing 200 of the whole wheat. Then we're going to mix this. Mix as much as you can with your tool, but eventually you actually have to get in here and actually get your hands dirty. Alright. So this should come together as a nice mess, so to speak. Shouldn't be too wet, shouldn't be too dry. It should be kind of like a biscuit dough when you first get it going, a shaggy mess as some people call it. And right now I'm just mixing it together. I'm not really kneading, but I'm trying to get all the dried flour mixed into here. And I think I gauged the amount of water perfectly, because there is some dry flour in here, but the dough is moist enough where I know it can handle that. So we're just gonna kind of press the dough, the sticky part of the dough down to pick up that flour. That's down the bottom bowl. Especially the whole wheat. The whole wheat does not like to incorporate sometimes. Alright. Okay. There we go. Almost got it all. Alright, so you can see my bowl is basically empty of flour. It's all in here. It's a nice shaggy mess. Not too loose, not too dry. So we're going to let this sit for about 10 minutes and do what's called auto-leasing, which gives the flour time to really absorb that water throughout the whole mass, gets it evenly hydrated, and then we'll start working this. The beauty of this sourdough method that I use is it's very hands-off approach. You let the dough do most of the work. You just kind of help it along a little bit. So I'm going to cover this with a damp towel, let it sit for about 10-20 minutes, and then we're going to come back and I'll show you how to start getting this put together. Alright, so we are back to do our first pull and stretch is the way that I do my sourdough bread. And it's what helps take the work involved in making bread out of making sourdough. So we're just going to take our dough and we're going to pull it and we're going to stretch it. Okay. And if you have a smaller batch, of course, you're not going to need as much area to do this. But you kind of just pull it as far as you can go, because you want to really stretch that gluten. Okay, so basically like this. I got a spot here that did stretch. Okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. You know, you just want to stretch it out. And then we're going to fold it like a letter. Okay. Just like so. And then we're going to make this into a ball shape again and stretch the outer skin back out. Again, we're just rolling the edges underneath it and kind of pinching underneath. Okay. Alright. I do have some gas bubbles forming, which shows me that my starter is very active. See the gas bubble here? So, yeah. Alright. And then we're going to do the exact same thing. We're just going to set it in the bowl. I'm not even going to grease it this time because it's still got some oil in there. Cover it back up, and we're going to do this again in about another half an hour or so. And this is the beauty of it, is you just set it and forget it kind of thing. Go about your business, come back, stretch and fold it, put it back in the bowl, go about your business. So it does take time, but it's time that you can actually do other things. So I'm going to set this off to the side, and I've got some canning I've got to get started. So we're going to do that while this is going. Alright friends, so we're here to do our shaping for our dough. So you can do this anytime after the second stretch and fold, I would say. Some people do it after the first because they're crunched for time. But we're doing our second stretch and fold here and shaping. Right? So we're just going to stretch this out. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut this in half so it's easier to work with. Oops. Okay. Then we're just going to stretch this out again like we did before. And you might have to let it rest because the gluten strands have really formed, so it's very elastic. So you got to work with it, not against it. Okay, just going to let that one rest while we work on this one. Alright, that's about where I want that one. trying to get the thick parts here stretched out too. So it's all basically the same thickness here. That way you know everything is stretched. Alright, looking pretty good. So now we're going to take these and we're going to form them into loaves. So again, we're just going to fold them like a letter, like we did before. We're going to make sure it's nice and sealed now because we're actually forming the loaf. So it's a nice sealed package. Okay, we're just going to set that there. Work on the next one. And bring those out. Hold it. Alright. So we're going to let these sit here for about 10 minutes like this. We want them to form a skin over top. It's going to help prevent them from sticking to our bannetons. And I will put a link in the description box below where I got these. These are wonderful bannetons. I got them from Amazon. They're very good quality. They do come with a liner, but I don't use the liner. I just use these just as they are. And I'm just going to simply get them ready by putting some flour in. Some people use rice flour. I don't have rice flour, so I just use this. And I kind of get them dusted like you would if you're dusting a cake pan or something. But I don't tap them too much because I want that flour to be in these crevices here. It's what helps keep it from sticking. So I need to add more flour to this one. Alright, like so. So these are ready to go. So we're just going to let these sit, like I said, for about 10 minutes. And then we're going to go ahead and put them in our proofing baskets. Alright, so we are here ready to put our dough into the proofing baskets. It has been sitting about 10-15 minutes to form a nice skin over the top. One of the ways that you can tell if your sourdough is correct is by the way that your doughs look when they are formed and been sitting here for 15 minutes. This is where I learned the importance of using the correct type of flour for your sourdough bread. If you're using an all-purpose flour or even a whole wheat flour, the dough will not hold its shape. And that is because there is not enough protein to form those gluten bonds, which we have been stretching out, to allow the dough to hold its shape. There's just no structure there, so it just flattens right out. However, with using the bread flour that's got the ability to form those nice gluten strands, this has structure for it to be able to hold its shape. This one is a little bit flatter. I think partially because it's heavier, so the weight kind of made it fall a little bit. But overall, it's still in the shape that we originally made it. So we're going to carefully put these upside down in our floured banneton baskets now. And one of the best ways to do this, and I forgot to get some going is actually to just dust it just gently. That gives it extra measure of not sticking to the basket. And then just set it in there. So again, just gently dusting. You do not want to break that skin that you let form, because that's what's going to keep it from sticking in the banneton basket. Right? And in she goes. Alright. Now we're going to let these set and rest for about 4 to 6 hours, or until you start seeing them rise. We want them to rise about halfway, not quite doubled in size because that's too much rise, but about half to 3/4 larger than what they are now. And then we're going to cover them and put them in the refrigerator overnight. They need that long time to ferment and proof in the refrigerator to really become that classic sourdough and really help if you have problems digesting gluten. This helps with that because it changes the molecules better and it's easier on your stomach eating it this way. Of course, this does not work for our celiac friends, unfortunately. Alright, so these guys have been sitting a while proofing in their banneton baskets. So they spring back when they're touched, which lets me know they're about the right spot for rising. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover them with plastic wrap. Not parchment paper, but plastic wrap. So I'm going to grab that here. Alright. Take some plastic wrap. We're going to cover these. That way it doesn't dry completely out or get all nasty in the refrigerator. Okay. Just like so. Some people put them in grocery bags or something like that, but I find that the grocery bag doesn't seal good enough against the elements of the refrigerator. Alright, so these are going to be put in the refrigerator to sit overnight. You want them to sit for at least 8 to 12 hours. It gives the dough time to ferment long enough to give it that nice sourdough flavor, texture, and of course the benefits of the sourdough bread. So I'm going to put these in the fridge, but you're not going to have to wait until tomorrow to see what they look like when they come out of the fridge, because I do have some that have already been proofing in the refrigerator overnight, and that's what we're going to start with next. Alright, here is the dough that I made yesterday, and I'm just going to get it out of this baton basket and show you how we work with it from here. So if you floured it right, you should be able to get it out of the baton pretty easy. But sometimes it needs a little help. You just gently pull it away from the sides of the basket here to loosen it up. And onto our parchment paper it goes. Alright. There she is. Isn't she beautiful? Look at those beautiful lines. And then I'm going to take my slicer thing. I think it's called lame. I can't remember. Anyways, I got this and the baskets on Amazon, and I will put a link in the description box below so you can pick these up. These are very nice, good quality baskets, and the tool is wonderful as well. It even came with extra blades. So I'm just go ahead and score this. I'm not perfect at doing this, but you know, I just had fun with it anyway. So I just basically follow the outline here, the top. And then I just do a few more cuts. Just to give it a little something something. Alright. So we're going to go ahead and put this in my Dutch oven. My Dutch oven has been sitting in a 450 degree oven for a half an hour. So it's completely warmed up. So the way to bake this is to put it in your Dutch oven or a similar type device and cook it for the first 20 minutes covered, and then we're going to take the cover off and cook it for another 15 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in my preheated Dutch oven, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Alright, here is our loaf of sourdough bread. Look at that. Isn't she beautiful? You can see where we made the score marks here. Nothing too fancy, but it did allow some of the steam to escape. This didn't have quite the oven spring as some of my other ones do. This will really open up and you'll see some beautiful, beautiful designs in this. But this is still beautiful and it's perfectly edible. So I'm going to get the other batch of dough that I've got in the oven and get that one made too. Alright, so here is our other loaf that we made today. And you can see it's got a little more oven spring in it. The score marks are a little more defined. Beautiful, beautiful loaf. Alright, so this is one of the loaves that we had baked today. This is one of the round loaves. So the round loaves didn't turn out as good as the rectangular loaves. That's okay. It still tastes good. So I'm going to cut this open and show you what it looks like on the inside. Alright. Look at that. Isn't she beautiful? Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's nice and done on the inside. So that's perfect for me. The holes and things aren't necessarily equal throughout the part. And it's got more gas up here, which is why the holes are bigger. But it's still cooked just fine. And it tastes wonderful. Alright, so that's how I cook sourdough bread here on the homestead. I know it was a bit longer of a video today, but I wanted to make sure that you understood step by step how I make sourdough so you're able to make it at your home as well and have good results. If you found this video informative, make sure you give it a thumbs up and share it with other people who might want to delve into making sourdough bread. I thank you for being with me on this journey today. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button down below. Love to have you along for the journey here on the homestead. And as always, I hope wherever you are, you're wonderfully blessed. So until next time, everybody, bye-bye.